It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode is brought to you by HP Instant Ink. No one is reading your mind, but HP Instant Ink knows when your printer is running low and sends new cartridges before you run out. So you never have to think about ink. For details, visit hp.com/instant ink Spotify. Conditions apply.
On today's Locked On Mavericks podcast, the Dallas Mavericks fall to the Sacramento Kings, and not in the way that I wanted to, but we got Matt George of Locked On Kings on here, so we're going to talk about probably anything but that game, because I know Matt doesn't want to talk about his team either, so we'll talk about some stuff coming up.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
What is this music? Is this Law and Order? What are they playing?
It was the miss by Luka.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks and Locked On Kings, also a crossover episode. My name is Nick Angstead, media member and coordinator of the Locked On Podcast Network, host of Locked On Mavs, and joining me for the first time, I think, he's got some explaining to do. What you got for me, Matt George?
I'm here to tank the show, baby. Matt George from Locked On Kings. Nick, it's a pleasure to be with you. You're absolutely right. I don't want to talk about this game. I don't want to talk about my team. I'll talk about the Mavericks. You talk about the Kings, and we'll give each other a break, all right?
All right, but before we do that, I have, this episode is brought to you by Locker Room. Download the app and join us, me and Isaac Harris, on Thursdays to get out on the action. Locker Room, changing the way we talk sports. They also have an Android app in beta right now. So if you guys have been waiting to get on Android, go ahead and get that. Hurry up, by the way. Don't wait at all. Download it right now as you're listening to this or watching this, because they said that there's limited spots for it. I don't know how that works, but there's just a limited number. So anyway, we have to start with this because this is the first time you've come on this show, I think. And we like to make fun of you a lot.
No. I couldn't tell. I definitely haven't listened.
Because you created a song parody about the Kings.
No, I didn't.
And not needing Luka Doncic.
That wasn't me.
For the Raccoon Squad, for the Locked On Mavs listeners, explain yourself. And do you have any regrets or remorse?
Regrets or remorse? I'm still right. I'm 100% right. The Kings don't need Luka Doncic. Come on. We got Marvin Bagley who plays 6 games every once in a while. No, I took... remember, after that 2018 draft, I naturally overreacted to the Kings getting off to a halfway decent start for the first time seemingly in my lifetime. And the Ringer put out their Hallelujah version, which was awesome. Really enjoyed it. But there was that line at the very, very beginning of it. The baffling Kings took Bagley over Luka. And at the time, Kings were playing well. Bagley was putting up halfway decent numbers coming off the bench. So, it's like, you know what? I'm going to have some fun and respond to this in my completely unartistic way. And I had fun recording it. It has not aged well at all. And that led to the recent song Double Down. So, my music career is going about as well as the Kings season.
Hey, we understand. Mavs fans should understand. If your team is bad, I mean, not as bad as the Kings have been for so long, but for a couple years there, it was looking bleak. It was just looking like Dennis Smith Jr., Wendell Carter Jr., or Dennis Smith Jr. Mo Bamba. That was going to be the future of the Mavericks. With
couple years,
with an aging Dirk, and if you have to create content every day, I know I did a Panda parody on Seth Curry. Yeah. I did a Yogi Ferrell. What was that? What was that song? You Ain't Got No Problem and No Problem With Me. Chance the Rapper. I did that one with Yogi Ferrell. So you got to get creative when your team is bad. And so anyway, Matt George is joining us. And so let's talk a little bit about this game. I want to at least break it down a little bit. Dallas Mavericks lose 106-113 to the Sacramento Kings. They were down to start this game 20-3. The Kings went off to this insane start. And the Mavericks have they were without Kristaps Porzingis. They were without Josh Richardson. They were without, JJ Redick. But the Kings were also without De'Aaron Fox. I mean, their best player by far. And the Mavericks keep getting out to these slow starts, and it's just getting more and more frustrating. Luka was asked about this after the game and said, I don't know how we get out to more energy. I don't know how we have more energy to start games. I don't know. It just has to change. And it does have to change. The Mavericks are a team that plays up and down to their competition. Our last YouTube video, if you're watching this on YouTube, the thumbnail says best win of the season, and this one's probably going to say worst win of the season, worst loss of the season, because it's just the way that this team works back and forth, going and flipping like this. What were you thinking when the Kings went out to a 20-3 lead at the beginning?
Well, I will say first, maybe one reason why you make fun of me so much is because of the fact that we're in such the same boat in a lot of ways. Now, the Mavericks obviously have more success and more to celebrate than the Sacramento Kings do, but what you just described, slow starts, playing to the level of the competition, that hasn't just been a problem for the Sacramento Kings this season. That's been a Kings problem for 15 freaking years now, regardless of who's on the roster, who's coaching, hell, who even owns the team. But this 20-3 start, it was enjoyable. It was fun. There wasn't a part of me that believed that the Kings were going to be able to sustain it and maintain it. So I was not surprised at all when the Mavericks were able to make a game of it in that second quarter, bring it to within 7 at halftime. And then they even took a lead in the third quarter, and no one in Sacramento was surprised by that. Now, I was pretty pleased for the most part with how the Kings were able to respond to some of the pressure and some of the pushes that the Dallas Mavericks made, even though they made up that 17-point gap relatively quickly. I think you put out the tweet. It was an awesome tweet. If you take away the 20-3 start, the Dallas Mavericks have a 17-point lead, which is a good way to look at it for the rest of the game. Just this Kings team, they're so wishy-washy. They're so on and off, regardless of who's playing. They're so unpredictable that it's frustrating, it's annoying, and it's exhausting. I said on yesterday's Locked On Kings podcast, I'm almost bored by this team. And some would say, wait, because they're so spontaneous, because there's different versions of them that you don't know what you're going to get, isn't that exciting? Because you're going to have to tune in to see what version of the Kings you get? No, hell no. Absolutely not when you have to watch this team and talk about this team on a daily basis. I want to know what this team is. And I honestly, this far into the season, I really couldn't tell you.
Yeah, and it feels that way with the Mavericks too. At least I would rather be in the position where you know that they can play up to certain competition. Like they've beaten the Jazz, they've beaten the Lakers twice. Like, the Lakers didn't have LeBron, but they did have Anthony Davis. But they've had some pretty big wins this season, and they can play up to competition. So when you go into the playoffs, it's like, okay, well, at least we know that they can play up to that. But the consistency, and this is a thing that young teams do, right? Like the Kings are a really young team. All the players I think we saw tonight are pretty much all like at the beginning of their career almost. It seems like there's not a lot of vets. Like Harrison Barnes, probably the vet on that team at this point.
Pretty much.
Maybe a couple of those guys have played a little bit more, but the Mavericks, people always say, well, they've got guys that have played a little bit longer in this league. But the three main guys on this team are Luka, Jalen Brunson, and Porzingis, and they're a young team. Those are all young guys, and so they play up and down in competition. It's just the way that it works. They get up for big games like the Lakers. They play bad games against teams like the Kings, and they lost to the Rockets recently. The Rockets have 3 wins in the month of April, and the Mavs are one of them. So I actually have a couple questions about this Kings team, though. You say you don't know what this team is, but we'll get into them a little bit more because I really like Tyrese Halliburton. I thought he had a pretty decent game. He did not like the game that he played, and he did not shoot the ball well in this one, but I thought he had a pretty big impact on this one. We'll get into some of those guys. Also, I want to talk about Richaun Holmes because this is a player that a lot of Mavs fans are looking at as a guy that the Mavs could add potentially this offseason, so we'll ask Matt about that coming up. But before we do, Locker Room. It is the place where you can go now on Android, by the way, to talk to us about the Dallas Mavericks. I don't know. Are you on there with Kings? Probably not.
Not yet, but now that they're coming to Android, I'm psyched, man. I'm about to hop on there.
It's the perfect place to start or join conversations about the league. You'll find fans just like you on Locker Room that like to complain about lots of Kings stuff and lots of Mavs stuff. Watch parties, debates, post-game breakdown. Last time I did a solo one, Isaac wasn't able to join, and we did one-on-one debates. I went back and forth and had, all right, who thinks this? Who thinks the Mavs should go after Lonzo Ball? Who thinks the Mavericks shouldn't go after Lonzo Ball? And I put them up one-on-one, and then I was the debate moderator. I thought it was pretty fun. Go download the free Locker Room app now, currently available on all iOS devices, and now there's a beta Android app. Create a profile, link your Twitter, join the NBA and the MFFL group, and follow me, Nick Van Exit, and you'll be notified whenever our room goes live. Locker Room, changing the way we talk sports.
This episode is brought to you by Wine.com. The days of standing in the wine aisle, staring aimlessly at a wall of wine without a clue, are over. Go to wine.com and pick the perfect bottle with confidence every time. Filter your search by price and professional ratings, read reviews, and even chat with real wine experts for recommendations. It's the world's largest wine store delivered to your door. And if you sign up for a stewardship membership, you'll get free shipping year-round on every order. Get $50 off your first order by going to wine.com/Spotify. Terms apply.
This year, the Locked On Podcast Network is partnering with the Draft Network to cover the NFL Draft this weekend live. Get inside analysis from the Locked On local experts and Draft Network's national experts. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL YouTube page to watch 3-day coverage live of the NFL Draft April 29th to May 1st this weekend. All right, Matt, let's get into this team a little bit. Well, we kind of broke down the game. What happened with the Mavericks is they didn't hit threes. And when they don't hit threes, they don't win. That's just kind of the way that it is. They shot 12 of 42 from the field. Luka was just not insane. And if Luka's not insane and the team isn't hitting threes, they're not going to win games. Tim Hardaway Jr. had just some of the dumbest decisions I've ever made. I tweeted one of them out where he just took a three with 13 seconds left in the shot clock with two kings in his face, like two hands in his face. And Trey Burke, who was pretty hot in this game, was playing one of the best games of his season, sitting over there in the corner by himself. He just completely looked off Trey Burke in the corner. And so he had some weird plays. Josh Green, he's a guy that I'm going to bring up because I thought he's had some pretty interesting plays in this game. Played 16 minutes. He actually got some run for the Mavericks. He has not played a lot for this team. And so that's interesting for Mavs fans. But anything on the Kings side you want to get to before we talk about anything else besides this loss for the Mavs?
Yeah, it's disappointing to see Harrison Barnes, who got off to another really solid start. He got off to a great start in last night's loss to the Golden State Warriors, a game in which the Kings should have won. And you talk about, it's funny, you talk about Hardaway Jr. making some questionable decisions. I could cut and paste Buddy Hield into that spot from the Kings perspective. I don't know if you saw last night, but Buddy Hield and the Kings trapping Steph Curry, forcing a turnover. Buddy had a wide open layup, literally nobody within 10 feet of him, except for Tyrese Halliburton, to give the Kings a 1-point lead. And Buddy Hield made his classic blunder of just forgetting how to use hands, I guess, and just dropping the ball and losing it out of bounds. So, but going back to Harrison Barnes, unfortunate to see him go down in this game after the great start that he got off to. Now, we believe it's some kind of groin injury, and I said this on my Locked On Now that I posted after the game, but I had a brief conversation with the former longtime athletic trainer for the Sacramento Kings, Pete Youngman, and he says this is one of those injuries that you typically miss a handful of games. So if that is the case, we hopefully will get positive news for Harrison Barnes going forward. But if that's the case, no Harrison Barnes and no De'Aaron Fox for the Kings for the foreseeable future. I'd say that would mean a lot of losses for Sacramento, but hell, with this freaking team, they might rattle off 10 in a row for no reason.
Harrison Barnes, that was brutal watching him walk off. And it just was a slow motion. Like he kind of grabbed with his inner thigh basically and just started walking the opposite direction from where everyone else was going. And you could just see it on his face. I tweeted out his expression. And that's a guy that Mavs fans still love. And we still, appreciate everything he did for the Mavs and everything he did for the Dallas community. And just hope that he's going to be okay and see how long he's going to be out there.
And Nick, he's played since being traded from Dallas to Sacramento. He's played in he's had 103 games in Sacramento, and he's missed only 3, including this game here tonight, or part of this game here tonight. So that's pretty incredible how available Harrison Barnes has been. And one more thing on HB, I remember the night that Dallas traded him to Sacramento. I already knew plenty about Harrison Barnes. I wasn't massively excited about the trade because I knew the paycheck that was coming that summer on the other side of it too, if the Kings were going to retain him. Right. But I remember Harrison not leaving. I remember him being informed during the game that he was traded and deciding to stay on the bench and continue to support his teammates. That's the kind of guy that Harrison Barnes is. Now, this Kings team lacks leadership, vocal accountability, holding leadership, guys that will really kind of get in and get underneath players when they aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Harrison Barnes is probably the biggest leader on this Kings team, but he's kind of that mellow, quiet, well-respected locker room leader. To put it this way, Nick, what we've heard from multiple players is the biggest talker and communicator in the Kings locker room is Buddy Hield. Okay. So yeah, that tells you everything you need to know.
Mavs fans have wanted Buddy Hield and wanted to trade for Buddy Hield in the past.
Sure, all yours. Take him.
Talk him off the ledge.
So here's the thing actually, I want to talk you onto the ledge and see if I can get any kind of thing for value in return. Look, Buddy is Buddy's really frustrating because I pick on him more than any other Sacramento King. And I said this in an interview that I had after last season with the Athletics' Sam Vecini, and he almost laughed me off the phone, basically. I told him that I felt that Buddy Hield last season was exposed as a really elite shooter, but average to below average everywhere else. And Sam kind of laughed at me, and he used Buddy Hield's numbers and the modern NBA to kind of support his argument. And I got that. But watching Buddy on a nightly basis, you realize as great of a shooter as he is, he's just not great at anything else. Now, he's gotten better as a passer, and I appreciate the work that he's put in on defense and trying to communicate more. But in a year where he's trying to do that more, his shooting numbers are down. And then he just makes some low basketball IQ plays, bad blunders, bad mistakes from time to time. For the money that he's being paid, plus his own perception of his importance with this Sacramento Kings team, I'm personally frustrated. I think the Kings need to try and move on as best as they can, get off of that contract. But, I mean, hey, Dallas, you want him? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think the Mavericks are interested in that, but he's shooting 39% from three on 10 attempts per game. But that is down a little bit from 43 his second year, 43 basically his third year, just about 40% the year before that. So yeah, a little bit down. The volume is up, but like you said, he's trying to work on these other things. And then yeah, defensively, he's just not good, right? So to me, it would just be another Tim Hardaway Jr.
Well, statistically, he is the worst defensive starting shooting guard in the NBA. And it's not close. And the Kings, for much of the season, rolled out a starting lineup featuring both him and Marvin Bagley. And Marvin was the worst defensive, I think, the worst defensive power forward for a time in the NBA. So that speaks to why the Kings have had the historically worst defense in the history of the NBA, because they've had literally two of the worst defenders in the league in their starting lineup.
There you go. So if any Mavs fans are still on the Buddy Hield train, Matt George would appreciate it. But
yes, please.
Let's talk about Richaun Holmes then, because this is a guy Mavs fans have also been really into. Seems like a guy, for me at least, would be a really solid backup center, really good in the pick and roll, and the Mavericks thrive with guys that are really good at the pick and roll. Like Dwight Powell has literally made his living because the Mavs are so reliant on pick and roll, centers. Tell me about Richaun Holmes. Is he going to be available this summer? There's been some talk about his contract and different things that have come up. The Kings would have to pay a certain amount and all that. Tell me about Richaun Holmes.
Yeah, I'm looking around my desk here to try and find something to fight you off with, because Richaun is not going anywhere, I hope. I love Richaun. He's the perfect fit for what the Sacramento Kings are trying to do. He's an incredibly hard worker. He's undersized for his position, yes, but he makes up for that with his hustle, with his energy. Honestly, the biggest gripe against Richaun Holmes this season is the amount of foul trouble that he gets into, but he gets into that foul trouble because, quite honestly, he's trying to make the extra aggressive physical play because the Kings lack aggression everywhere else, and oftentimes he's trying to bail out a guard that got killed on the perimeter. So Richaun he's just so solid. He's so consistent. His push shot is one of the most automatic shots that I've seen ever. It just always seems to go in. Last I checked, and it could have changed, I think he leads the league still in field goal percentage. He's just Mr. Reliable on a nightly basis. And with his journeyman status in the NBA, going from team to team, really coming into the NBA from Bowling Green and just trying to make a name for himself. He came to Sacramento, quickly replaced Dwayne Dedmon, who didn't work out at all, and cemented himself as a starter. And he's carried that through with his numbers going up almost across the board this season. So Richaun Holmes is going to get paid this summer, and rightfully so. Now, what are the numbers going to be? Really no idea, because the center market and big man market and free agency over the last few years has been so up and down and crazy and weird, right? But I believe it is a top priority for the Sacramento Kings to try and find a way to re-sign Richaun Holmes. I know there's only a certain amount that they're going to be able to offer him. I don't know what that number is off the top of my head. But if the Kings lose Richaun Holmes for nothing, the year after they lost Bogdan Bogdanovic for nothing, those are the two big free agency moments for Monty McNair in his first full calendar year as a general manager. That's not going to sit well at all. With the exception of finding a way to get Joel Embiid here in Sacramento, and I'm not saying Richaun is Joel Embiid's level, but that's the only way you're improving over Richaun in my mind. He's the right fit for what the Kings need.
You see him as the starting center of the Kings going forward?
Correct. I do. And I think if the Dallas Mavericks were to get him, first off, that would be amazing for them. Truly amazing for them. I think he'll be a great fit wherever he goes. But in Dallas, I think he could be exceptional there. And I honestly would think that he would make a push for the starting center position pretty quickly. I think there would be an argument for him starting at that center spot in Dallas. But if you have him coming in off your bench, man, what an asset to have.
Well, how is he defending out in space? Because the Mavericks play Kristaps Porzingis. He is not good at that, and they play Maxi Kleber at that other big man spot because he's able to go out and defend in space, and he's able to stretch the floor and that kind of stuff. How's he like as a rim protector and then also defending out in space?
He's gotten better as a rim protector this year, blocking shots. His blocks are up. Like I said, he does get in foul trouble, maybe leaving his feet or going for the block when he should just stick both hands up. But I would say his defense has significantly improved over the last couple of years. Perimeter-wise, he still lacks in lateral quickness, but he can stay in front of, I would say, the majority of maybe small forwards, maybe even shooting guards. Point guards will beat him off the dribble, but that's to be expected with a big man. Let's put it this way, I don't think it's going to be so significant of a hindrance to really be noticeable because he makes up for it in so many other ways on both ends of the floor.
Love to hear that. So yeah, so we talked you off one, King and Buddy Hield, and now we're
I'm talking you into Buddy Hield. Yeah. And I'm telling you to leave Rashawn Holmes alone.
Coming up, let's get into some all NBA stuff and just some general NBA stuff. We've done some surveys over the last couple of weeks with the Locked On NBA hosts. We're going to break some of those down. Who's going to win the title? Who's going to win MVP? Who's coming in second? Luka did not come in top 5 in our MVP voting recently, so we'll talk about that, get into that a little bit with Matt George of Locked On Kings coming up. But before we do, let's talk about rockauto.com. There's so many different reasons to fix a car. I have a car just sitting out in my driveway I need to fix. I know there are parts available for it at rockauto.com. I could just go to it, rockauto.com, and find. Let's see, I have a Kia. I have a 2009. I have a, what is it? What kind of car is it? I just go right to the parts that are available for my car. Spectra, boom, all the stuff available for my car right now. Accessories, belt drive, body and lamp assembly, brake and wheel hub, cooling system, drivetrain, electrical, whole bunch of electrical stuff, engine stuff, exhaust stuff, fuel and air, heat and air conditioning, all kinds of stuff. I can just say window washer, like windshield wipers and washer fluid, all that kind of stuff, specifically made for my car. So you can go to rockauto.com and tell them that Locked On sent you when you get there. RockAuto.com is the one-stop shop for everything you need for your car. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Also want to tell you about betonline.ag. BetOnline is your place to put down some money on sports. The fastest and easiest way to bet on some sports action. Baseball is in full swing, and you can track all the action at BetOnline. This week has tons of sports action on the go as the NFL Draft is on. The Kentucky Derby is back, and the first leg of the Triple Crown begins this weekend. Get all the latest news, odds, and info for all your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, and UFC and MMA. You can get a lot of action, put a lot of action down on that, but they have NFL draft stuff if you're into that and all that kind of stuff. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is your chance to get into the game as the team preps for their runs for the playoffs. Head to the website and use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Use the promo code LOCKEDON. Want to tell you about our friends Locked On Today. Host Peter Bukowski hosts an incredible show just every day with all of the voices from across the network. It's all the sports news you need in under 20 minutes. The Phoenix Suns will be highly featured today. Brendan Clean, the great host of Locked On Suns, is going to be on there. So go check it out, subscribe, and follow wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Today. All right, Matt George. So we talked about our teams enough. We're annoyed with them at this point in the season.
Just a bit.
You more than me. But a couple of surveys we've done over the last couple of weeks with Locked On. And the first one I'm going to get to is who's going to win the title. We had a bunch of our hosts vote. I think 24, 25 of our hosts voted. And the Nets, 12 first-place votes.
Ugh.
The Lakers, 8 first-place votes.
Ugh.
And the Clippers, 5 first-place votes.
Ugh.
Where did you vote, and where do you see that vote coming out to be?
I don't remember which one of those three terrible teams that I decided to vote for, but I think I picked the Lakers just because they're the defending champs and LeBron James, Anthony Davis. You can't beat them until you beat them, and I assume they're going to be healthy and ready to go by the playoffs. So I think yes, I remember I did cast my vote for the LA Lakers, but man, I hope we don't get that LA versus Brooklyn or LA versus New York scenario. It's just something
you don't want to see a fully healthy Brooklyn versus a fully healthy Lakers.
Absolutely not, because to me it just enables the big market buyout just advantage that jealously Sacramento doesn't have. And then I look at the season that like the Utah Jazz are having. I look at the season that the Phoenix Suns are having in the West, and either of those two teams is I immediately more desirable for me. I want to root for them. I want to see them make it, especially the Utah Jazz, who built their core essentially through the draft. So I root for those teams a hell of a lot more than I root for what the Brooklyn Nets have done. I think the NBA needs to look at what the Brooklyn Nets have done with the buyout market. Now, they haven't blown anybody away too much with the buyout market, like getting Blake Griffin, okay. We know he's not the Blake Griffin of a number of years ago, but getting James Harden to basically force his way out of Houston and to Brooklyn, I just don't like that major market advantage. I don't think it's fair. And I don't want to see that team face my dreaded enemy in the Los Angeles Lakers, who they've already won it, but at least they did it by, well, I can't really even say that too, because they kind of forced an Anthony Davis trade. So
they got a pretty good deal back for it. I mean, it wasn't like they got more than the James Harden trade. Like,
absolutely.
They got all the picks that the Rockets got in that, and they got an all-star Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball. So at least they got that. But I totally get what you're saying with this whole thing, because it's literally those three teams are the ones that have benefited from this, coastal, I don't know, we want to go down the whole path, like coastal elitist, like the big markets like benefiting from these stars moving and wanting to play together. And it's those three teams that have literally benefited from that. And so, yeah, I mean, there's nobody else outside of that group, though, that stands out. I mean, the Sixers is probably the closest out of those. Do you think they can hang with the Nets? But there's nobody really in the West, like the Suns and Jazz. I can't be convinced the Suns and Jazz are going to be in the finals. I don't know why. There's just some kind of block there in my mind that just doesn't let them go to the finals in my brain.
No, I think it's fair, and I actually kind of have that block for the LA Clippers for some reason, which I'm trying to get over. It's
because they're cursed. They're cursed forever. Like
right.
Literally, if last season didn't show you, they had their best team of their entire existence, and they just completely blew a 3-1 lead, and almost they would have blown it to the Mavs too. We've talked about this so many times, but if Kristaps Porzingis would have been healthy, I think they would have lost that first round series.
Yeah, but I'm with you. I understand the hesitation to think that the Jazz and Suns are going to make it. Look, they've been amazing during the regular season, but we know the regular season is very different from the postseason. And as fun as the Suns were at the bubble and as important of an addition as Chris Paul has been for Phoenix, we know Paul has struggled to make it all the way through to an NBA Finals appearance in the past, and he's only getting older type thing. So I'm rooting for both those teams. I'm with you, though. I understand. I'm rooting hard for Philadelphia and Boston as well to overtake the juggernaut that is the Brooklyn Nets. I don't know why I don't put the Milwaukee Bucks in that conversation. I just don't have that much faith in that team. I really don't want to see the Nets make it. Honestly, I'd be happier with the Lakers making it than the Nets make it, because I just don't want to see what they've done this season rewarded in that way. I wouldn't be surprised, but I just don't want to see it.
So let's say this is the way that it works out. So right now, as the standings stand, the Heat would play the Hornets in the play-in. Let's say the Heat win that, then they would go play the Sixers. And then if the Hornets beat either of the Wizards or the Pacers, like any of those three teams goes and plays the Nets in the first round, like that's just a buzzsaw right there.
That's a sweep. Yeah, that's a sweep.
And then the Nets' next opponent would be either the Knicks or the Hawks. And then they would play whatever came out of the bloodbath of the Bucks, the Celtics, the Heat, and the Sixers. This team may have like a really easy path to the finals if that's the way it stands. Now, the Nets could totally fall out of that first spot, and if they did, then it would have a really tough route. On the other side of the bracket, though, you look at the Lakers, they may have to play like a Denver team that has a broken, like Jamal Murray, that's not going to play. Then they would play Utah probably. Donovan Mitchell either is going to be not 100% or not playing. And then they would play whoever comes out of the Dallas, Clippers, Suns, and then either Portland, Memphis, or whoever comes out of the play-in the 7th seed. So the Lakers' path and the Nets' paths might be really, really easy for them going into. So I think that's what we're going to see in the finals.
Yeah, it would make sense to see those two come out of it. I would not be surprised at all. Again, I'm not rooting for it. I would absolutely hate it because I think I would be forced to root for the Lakers in that scenario because I'm sure I'm going to watch. And that's one of the things that I hate the most about it is you're going to watch, and the TV ratings, just because of the markets and because of the talent on both teams, are going to be great. So it's going to be good for the NBA, but it's not good for the NBA, at least from a competitive standpoint, in my opinion. But looking at the Western Conference, I think we're in for some really fun playoff matchups. I think we're going to be in for some surprising deep series versus on the Eastern Conference. I can see a few more sweeps or a few more 5-game.
I mean, that first round series right now would be Bucks and Celtics in the East. Like that one's pretty good, and even like Heat Sixers, that one could be really, really interesting too.
Mm-hmm. I think I give the East a lot more credit with the depth to their teams, but I also think that there's significance with teams that are in the playoffs for the first time. Like, for example, the Atlanta Hawks. We don't know what kind of team they are, what they're going to be. They're inconsistent. Is Trae Young going to be available? I love Bogdanovich, and he's on an absolute heater right now. And now everybody's saying, oh, look, the Kings let Bogey walk, as if the Hawks weren't looking to trade Bogdanovich just a few weeks ago at the trade deadline when things weren't going well. So this team is inconsistent. I have high hopes for them, but I don't know what they can do. The New York Knicks are fourth. I think that's great for the NBA, but they have little to no playoff experience. And as good as Tom Thibodeau is and has that team playing, I don't have much faith in their ability to make any kind of deep run. So
they're so reliant on Randall as that like one guy to just make some shots. Like you saw that in that Phoenix Suns Knicks game the other night, last night actually, Monday night. And they just are so reliant on Randall to just do everything. Like he honestly, people compare. Well, he would if he replaced Porzingis, what would he be for the Mavs? Like his offensive role is more like Luka's than it is like Porzingis. If you just want to compare it to Mavs, like he handles the ball a lot, he distributes a lot, he averages a bunch of assists, he takes a bunch of threes, and all his threes are like step back, like weird stuff. Like I can't believe that he's a better 3-point shooter than Porzingis at this point in his career. But yeah, they're so reliant on him. So I don't see the Knicks. I mean, it'd be so fun to see a Brooklyn Knicks series. And hopefully, like, if the Knicks win a game, Twitter is just done. Knicks Twitter will just, like, explode.
Absolutely.
So much, especially if it's game one. If the Nets drop a game one like the Raptors, used to always do, then that would be hilarious.
So there's two sides of the New York Knicks success for me. One is I think it's phenomenal for basketball that a good team is playing in Madison Square Garden. I think it's great for basketball. It's great for the NBA. It's going to be awesome for that market. I know I just kind of demolished the Brooklyn Nets for being in the mega New York market, but we know the Knicks have not done anything right despite being in that mega market. But then on the other side of that coin, the Knicks have always been such a laughing stock in the East that it made being a Kings fan and follower a little bit easier. Now the Knicks are good. And here's Sacramento like, well, dang it. we're still terrible. So I'm happy for the Knicks. I like what Thibodeau's doing there. I like that Knicks team. I love Julius Randle. Man, we were having conversations back in summer of 2018 about the Kings drafting Luka Doncic and signing Julius Randle in free agency that offseason. Oh, if I could turn back time.
I mean, the Mavs, a lot of Mavs fans talked about that too, is something that they would want to do. And Julius Randle's from Dallas and all that kind of stuff. Before we go, I have to ask you about, let's see. Oh, here we go. I got it. I pulled it up. There's a stat recently that just absolutely blew my mind. And I think you know where I'm going with this, but holy cow, this stat about the Sacramento Kings. This stat about the Kings are going to have a losing season. When they lost the other night, it was guaranteed they're going to have a losing season. And so, winning seasons in Sacramento with Rick Adelman, who was coach when?
Coach between...
It was like that 2002.
Yeah, it was during the glory era. I'm trying to remember which year he came to Sacramento. It was, I think it was like 97 or 98. I'd have to.
Yeah,
I should
like
know
late
that.
90s, early 2000s. 8 years, and he had 8 winning seasons in Sacramento. Winning seasons in Sacramento with anyone else as the head coach, 0 for 28. They've had no winning seasons outside of when Rick Adelman was the head coach back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Like that stat absolutely blew me away because that just is so weird. Do you have a response to it?
End the show. Let's end the show. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I didn't have a good time with you. I don't appreciate you inviting me on just to do stuff like this to me. Look, it's already hard enough. 15 freaking years of this crap, and you have to bring this up. All right, okay. And you, Josh DeBow, deciding to post stuff like this just because it's statistical and factual doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Okay. God dang it. I hate when people bring crap like this up, but they're absolutely right. The Kings have been a revolving door of head coaches. And don't you like it? You will not like that post. Damn it.
I favored it.
He liked and favorited it. Oh,
wait,
God.
I'm gonna bookmark it.
No, stop it. Just stop it. This is bullying, and I'm not okay with it. But in reality, like, the Kings have been a revolving door, or I call it a coaching carousel, just around and around and around and around they go. And look, it's talking about Luke Walton, whether or not Luke Walton's going to come back next season.
No, he's done, right? Like, they're going to be done with him.
It's pretty, the belief is that he is going to be done. But I've talked about this a lot on Locked On Kings. I have little to no faith that it's going to change anything until it changes something, if that makes sense. Like, there have been so many different coaches that have come through here, so many different players that have come through here, general managers. I even mentioned the ownership change during this 15-year playoff streak for the Sacramento Kings. It's such a cultural issue, just a culture of losing and being terrible and being mediocre and busted draft picks and mediocre free agency signings and wasting talent while they were here. It just continues. And there's just been so many coaching changes that the inconsistencies everywhere across the board are enough to make you want to pull your hair out. So that's not, when I saw it, doesn't surprise me at all. And Rick Adelman is an absolute legend. I hope he makes it into the NBA Hall of Fame, or I should say the Basketball Hall of Fame, because he's incredible. It's unfortunate that he didn't get his ring here in Sacktown, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, Adelman's a legend. Adelman, what he was to the Sacramento Kings, there's no more important number than what that says right there.
Yeah, there you go. Hopefully, Mavs fans, that made you feel a little better. But I also just feel I feel now for Kings fans.
I hate you guys. I hate you guys so much, you stupid Mavs fans.
There we go. We'll be back tomorrow. Isaac will be back tomorrow. The Mavericks play the Golden State Warriors. We'll break down that game. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs. Peace out. Boom. And now, your moment of zen.
Hey, Rick, do you know anything more about whether or
I don't know who's playing tomorrow. Don't ask. Don't anybody ask. Don't ask. I'm tired of all that stuff.